Tulo le atua le afuanga o le mataisau le tufungapoto no foina mea uma. Tulo tangata o le vanua. Tulo le moa malanga o mātua wa mua atu. Tulo na sui o whainga malo o wharapotonga, sui kalesia, papere whaletele o le Pasifika. Tulo wharapotonga tumoti, pai o ekalesia, whaurulunga o ekalesia. Tulo le pai o potopoto, tulo na lava. I am deeply humbled by the invitation to speak on the theme leadership and diplomacy in Pasifika philosophies and ethics, concepts, metaphors, and relevance to today's development narrative. What a huge task that I was given to do. But I will try my best to capture this theme under the theme that I've chosen, leadership and Taitai, leadership and diplomacy in Samoan Perspective. I am indebted to Bishop Isaki Casimira, Director of Regional Institute for Leadership Development, and the team for organizing this very important conversation. Next. The Myna Bird Syndrome. Let me begin with a story. In the mid-1960s and the 1980s, the Myna bird was introduced to Samoa by the Samoan government to control livestock ticks impacting agricultural activities. It was one of the most anticipated solutions of the time, where Samoa was at the height of agricultural export. However, the Myna bird, while attending to its initial mission, unexpectedly became an invasive species, threatening native wildlife and preying and killing endemic native species. Over the past 2 decades, their populations have increased dramatically. And if you go to the town of Apia in Samoa, you will hear their noise every day and every night, making noise. Now it is costing millions of dollars for Samoa and other Pacific governments to fund an awareness campaign to address the Myna Bird Syndrome. An imported solution of biological control of insect pests has generally become a pest itself. Next. Kasi has spoken on Western philosophies and articulated very well this morning the difference between Western philosophies and Pasifika philosophies. I just want to share a little bit on that to add to Kasi's articulation. I want to focus on the fact that our ideas and forms of leadership and diplomacy today are constantly marked by a resemblance of the Myna syndrome legacy, predominantly grounded and shaped by Western philosophical ideals and economic demands that so-called leaders no longer have the agility to respond to the looming polycrisis that is becoming more and more invasive with all-pervading magnitude in the Pasifika household. Today, our collective moral order, our collective moral fabric has collapsed due to a linear, compartmentalized narrative we have created based on the ideals of Western philosophy. Not saying that Western philosophy is bad. I'm saying that Western philosophy was created for another context, in another world, to solve issues in another world, not so much for the whole world. At the heart of Western philosophy is the use of reason and scientific investigation to explore fundamental questions about the nature of reality and knowledge. Western philosophies depend on purely rational methods to investigate fundamental questions of life to arrive at wisdom. Such an approach mainly focuses on singularizing reality, breaking down relations into singular ones to form isolated binaries or compartments. This discursive action involves positioning these in competition or contradiction with each other in order to accurately construct and evaluate what we called truth. Truth in this understanding is achieved only as a result of deduction, as Kasi mentioned this morning, exclusion of the other in the competition. The idea is that the more we isolate and put things into competition, the more we accumulate information of their potential qualities, and the more truth is revealed. This is the either-or approach that views reality in competing contradictions, where things can only be understood through logical deduction. It is a method characterized by a focus on elimination in order to easily define, verify, categorize, and extract something for the sake of scientific knowledge and data. Leadership today, and perhaps Kasi has touched it more eloquently than but I'll just say something about it. Leadership today is driven by the notion of competing contradictions. We train leaders with the idea that development is only possible through putting societies and peoples in competition. As a result, we build a democratic system that endorses the stigmatization of losers of the system and the elimination of the other who is different. In this system of competition, we train leaders under the more is better paradigm, that they think they are entitled to anything and everything that are gifted to God to others. Because of the concept or the notion of human rights, they think they are entitled to speak more and listen less, theorize more and practice less, earn more and share less. We develop leadership that focuses on specialized skills determined by the market demands outside of the common moral order. We privatize spirituality and morality to the extent that if slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. If the oppression of West Papua is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. If deep sea mining is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. Today, we have leaders finding their own truth and values outside of the collective moral fabric. The starting point for Pasifika philosophies, of course, as Kasi touched on this morning, is the responsibility of and to the collective whole. This is why Pasifika philosophies view reality as composed of mutual contradiction, where things are viewed as a complex and interconnected whole. Pasifika philosophies are deeply spiritual and employ more the both and approach in their pursuit of wisdom. Wisdom in this regard is achieved through negotiation and restraint, not logical deduction. I can say that logic is part of philosophy, but it's not the main one. It's only part of it. It is to avoid singularization of relationships and elimination of the other. The goal of Pacific philosophy, therefore, is not so much logical truth, but rather life and well-being. This Talanoa aims to provide an example from the Samoan perspective of a different form of leadership, grounded on Samoan Pacific philosophies, ethics, if we are in search for the ideas to reclaim our collective moral fabric. concepts in perspective. Please allow me to put some concepts into perspective. In 2017, the Pasifika churches started its restoring process by adopting the Pasifika Household of God regional framework. Such framework not only redefines the region as a unified household, ainga o vuvale, without divisive imaginary boundaries created by colonizers based on color, size, and volume, but also the Pasifika Household of God captures the common struggle of the household under neo-colonial threats, including the threat of climate change and many other ecological crises, broadening the stewardship responsibility of churches beyond religious boundaries to include cultural knowledge and identity, management of resources, and all issues of development that affect the shared Pasifika household. In 2019, the term Pasifika was strategically introduced to replace the word Pacific, shifting away from the idea of being peaceful, as connoted in the colonial term Pacific, to that of resilience and determination, self-determination as a household. The term Pasifika used at PTC since then means a new awareness. In 2020, the Whole of Life vision was born to guide the church's mission in creating and shaping a new development story that is firmly grounded on life-affirming philosophies, values, and spiritualities of the household. This year in April, PTC will become a new regional educational institution called the Pasifika Communities University, or PCU, as the home of whole of life education, and also as a home for a new development consciousness that embraces our ways of knowing and being, grounded in our own whole of life philosophies and ethics. Next. The Taitai concept. I want to begin with the claim that leadership does not refer to a person nor to an attribute tied to title, position, or ranking. Rather, leadership is a relationship. What does this mean? Let me unpack this a bit from my Samoan perspective. Leadership in Samoa is translated Taitai, which is rooted in the word tai, meaning to lure or to persuade. Leadership in this regard is then more about luring than about leading. It is about to urge to persuade than about the urge to coerce. This is at the heart of the mentoring culture of the Samoan old traditions. Let me explain a little bit more about this tai concept. The tai concept comes from fishing. During a fishing expedition, the tautai, or the fisherman, must first and foremost commit to understand the fish. Fishing involves the ability to understand the three worlds of the fish. One, the world around the fish, the sea. Second, the world in the fish, the mind of the fish. And third, the world of the fish, or the way of the fish. The tautai must be flexible and adjustable in order to capture these worlds, which is why there are different kinds of tai. Tai mua, to lure forward. Tai muli, to lure backwards. Tai alunga, to lure upwards. And tai alalo, to lure downwards, are all movements that require the nimbleness and adjustability of the tautai, or the fisherman. The purpose is for the tautai to be able to see the world from the perspective of the fish. And most importantly, to know the way of the fish and to gain its trust. The whole metaphor shapes the way leadership should be understood in Samoa. Taitai doesn't mean lead. Taitai means to lure, to persuade. At the heart of leadership in Samoa is the wisdom of restraint, or tofa tau fiofi. Tofa is wisdom, and tau fiofi comes from the root word taufi, meaning to restrain, to contain, to limit, to wait. During the act of tai, or luring, the tautai requires waiting patiently, requires endurance, as if the tautai is waiting to enter the mind of the fish. And this is critical for understanding leadership. Leadership must acquire the wisdom of waiting. Knowledge is also about waiting. This is because knowledge is spiritual. Therefore, we cannot rush knowledge to another person. We wait for knowledge to be processed first before we put that knowledge into a speaking form. This is where the concept of time is critical to leadership. The luring form of leadership does not work in a linear concept of time where we rush knowledge. Two reasons why. First, luring and persuasion takes time, as it involves negotiation and intercessions, therefore cannot be rushed. The one being persuaded requires space and freedom to think and decide without being coerced. Second, is in the process, the one being persuaded cannot be treated as a mere individual, but rather as a multidimensional being. There is a relationship in there, a va, that needs to be respected. In other words, the persuasion process has to consider multiple relationships and the impact of these relationships to potential intervention and convergences in the future. Next. Let me talk about the Taitai leadership model. I would like to offer 5 principles of leadership grounded in the relational whole-of-life philosophies of Pasifika that I believe are critical to reclaim this collective moral fabric in leadership. Next. Next, please. Yep. First is the principle of integration. The Taitai model of leadership sees life as always integrated, and therefore everything is connected to everything. Because the human being, land, sea, and sky are interrelated and part of the kinship network. Therefore, all issues emerging from these are all interrelated. In the tai process, or in the persuasion luring process, the Taitai, or the leader, sees that the health of the people depends on the health of the land and ocean, and vice versa. If one relation is disturbed or wounded, the whole is disturbed and wounded. The Taitai model must delve into multidimensionality and complexity of life in order to deal with multifaceted issues and challenges of communities. This is why in Pasifika communities believe more in continuity than in a one-dimensional linear destination. This is because a one-dimensional leadership model cannot provide long-term solutions to multifaceted issues and polycrisis. Let me just give one example in Samoa. In Samoa, human rights is translated aya tatau. Next, please. Sorry, aya tatau. Aya means right, but the tau is the key word here. It means appropriate, ethical, aligned to the whole. The Tao appeals to the ethical side of rights, the aspect of time, and the many other dimensions that are often dismissed when we discuss human rights. While I have rights, they are often followed by the question, is it appropriate? Is it ethical? Is it aligned to the whole? Is it timely? The word tatau functions to slow down the process of implementing rights, to consider the importance of community and relationships in a picture. Today, we rush into implementing and in some cases, imposing rights at the expense of the multidimensionality of communities. Rights are important. Equally important is the ability of leadership to develop social controlling mechanisms in order to control the ego and to serve the collective moral fabric. Because of the integration of life, leadership must move with ethics, with care, with cautious, with limits. This is the whole of life approach to leadership, where holding both individuality and communality as a collective whole is key to resilience and sustainability. The principle of restraint, the second one. The Taitai leadership model sees life as structured around and through interweaving of tensions and contradictions. We all grew up together with these tensions and contradictions, and the world is made up of tensions and contradictions beyond our control. The whole persuasion and luring process is grounded in this knowledge. Tofata of Yofi resists a permissive social construct where I have the right and freedom to do and say whatever I want as long as I am entitled to. Tofata of Yofi counsels that it is not about what you know, but rather how much you know, how to control what you know. But the wisdom of restraint is bigger than just maintaining human and interhuman relationships. It is about well-being of the whanua, the land. The value of restraint includes knowing what to speak, the importance of content, where to speak it, the importance of time, when to speak it, the importance of time, where to speak it, the importance of situating in place and space, and how to speak it, the importance of method and approach. This does not mean that leadership will not have autonomy. Rather, autonomy is informed not so much by whether we have the right to speak or do something, but rather whether we have the right content, right time, the right space and place, and the right approach in order to allow space for maturity in speech, wisdom in doing, and prudent judgment in decision making. You'll find this in the concept of the Sabbath in the Bible, for example, an ecological principle to control greed and over-exploitation of the land and vulnerable members of the community. The wisdom of restraint operates through the active expression of autonomy that is attuned to interconnectedness. Restraint serves as an ethical and moral system put in place to help slow down development, to balance and harmonize the relationship of the collective whole. In many Pasifika communities, restraint summons the will to wait or to pause. Our ancestors knew very well that anything that involves leadership is prone to the lure of power and the enticement of an expanding ego, especially when it is a system that implicates benefits and privileges. Therefore, there is a need of restraint set forth by our ancestors to ensure, to control our ego. Next, the principle of persuasion. The concept of tai or luring or persuasion means that the one who does the luring does not have the unilateral coercive control over everything, which is why leadership is about maintaining freedom and self-determination to be creative and innovative. What this means is that leadership is more about persuasion and mentoring than about regulatory governing. The later promotes coercive power and a former persuasive power. This is why leadership in Samoa is called Taitai, which is both a noun and a verb. When a fish is finally persuaded, the fish subdues to the process of Taitai. Hence is the Samoan saying, "Wa Taitai whaia mātau wa tautai," meaning the fish reverently admits to the fisherman's lure. It means that the two minds, the mind of the tautai and the mind of the fish, have finally accomplished trust. One cannot lead until one is able to master the art of persuasion in Samoan leadership. Therefore, leadership requires a painful and intolerable wisdom of waiting, the wisdom of contracting, the wisdom of limiting our knowledge and our power on the part of the one doing the luring for the sake of collective care. It requires us to reclaim the concept of relational time. Time is supposed to serve relationships, not the other way around. That's why in many Pasifika communities, we bend time. Two examples I want to offer from a Samoan context to explain the leadership principle of persuasion. First is the concept of moe le toa, which is critical to leadership and diplomacy. Moe is sleep, toa is the name of a tree that is often used to produce durable weapons of war. Moe le toa refers to the process whereby production of a heavy, durable weapon requires that it sleep in water for a very long period of time. This metaphor is often used in delaying decision-making. Because of relationship, leaders must not rush into deciding things. Once we are fast in pace, not only we will leave many people behind, we will never find wisdom. Wisdom is often slow. That is its nature. When one slows down, wisdom slowly catches up, and presence is achieved. Presence is the purest form of leadership, being there, being with. This is also at the heart of the story through the incarnation of Christ. It is all about presence, which is why wisdom works better in persuasion and negotiation rather than coercion. So in moe le toa, when we say moe le toa, when we don't have a decision on this day, we say moe le toa. Let the toa sleeps, we come back tomorrow and decide again. We never rush into a decision until everyone is on board. That is part of a persuasion, principle of persuasion. The other principle, is a notion of whātau. Whātau is the cultural process of selecting an orator to speak on behalf of family or village community. This process involves serious negotiations and persuasions until there is consensus agreement amongst those involved. The persuasive method used in this cultural protocol highlights that a speaker cannot be voted or appointed into representing the community as now we do today. The orator who will represent the community must earn it through mastering the art of negotiation and persuasion. And such process must be done in a culturally appropriate manner that aligns with firmly held communities, genealogies, traditions, cultures, and stories. Again, the notion of persuasion is very critical in this act, in this ritual or ceremonies. Next, The principle of mutual contradiction, the second to the last one. Because of the principle of persuasion, leadership must be trained to deal with interweaving of tensions and contradictions. Here, the boundaries between worlds, such as material and spiritual, living and dying, constantly move and shift to inform one another. This is why many Pasifika cultures, peace and conflict, opportunity and risk, harmony and contradictions, affirmations and negations are just different sides of the same whole. Leadership needs to be equipped with this both and principle in order to be able to navigate complexity and multiplicity. Leaders who are trained in this wisdom have the ability to live and deal with conflicting moments. People grow up with a psyche that I am in the land and the land is in me. And because of this co-inherence of everything, there is no security without spiritual security. No loss that is purely tangible in nature. Life operates in dealing with the interplay of all these different moments, such as life and death, peace and conflict, calm and disaster, connection and disconnection, and the list goes on. The Taitai model of leadership struggles to achieve the sum of unity and distinction, connection and disconnection, if it's grounded on competing contradictions. The mutual contradictions should not be treated as competing opposites. Contradictions that we have in life should not be treated as competing opposites, but that must be eliminated, but rather tensions that mutually coexist to help people navigate potential shocks and multiple convergences. And the last one is the principle of difference. The Taitai model of leadership sees that difference is key to unity, and this is why it's very important. Because of the persuasion and because of mutual contradictions, all of this was put in place not to eliminate the person who is different from us. So that's why difference is so key to Pacific philosophies. Unity both differentiates and connects us. While we are all distinct and different, negotiating, navigating, and persuasion are key not only to sustainability, but the corrective balance of the whole. To appreciate the principle of difference and to avoid the elimination of the other, persuasion is critical. Persuasion avoids elimination and coercive leadership. Things exist as a differentiated whole, not in isolated compartments. Therefore, one cannot exist without the other. It is a consciousness that is not afraid to delve into the depth of differences in order to find meaning. That's why in many rituals, many ceremonies, many families, in many communities, they always negotiate their contradictions and tensions and differences for the sake of not elimination, but for the sake of living together as a whole in their own collective differences. To conclude, I want to end with some recommendations, and I don't want to offer a conclusion in which I hope that would be part of the conversation today, but I want to end with some recommendations. One, if we really need to move forward with leadership, we need a foundational philosophy and theology of leadership. The issue is that as long as leadership discourse is continually underpinned by Western philosophical framing, we will continue to struggle to implement change in the leadership discourse, especially in Pasifika. Some of us, we have been looking at changing leadership programs, leadership policies or leadership frameworks, but have we ever asked the question, what is the foundation of those leadership programs? Second, recommendation to develop a new regional leadership framework grounded on Pasifika philosophies, ethics, and spiritualities. Do we have a Pasifika regional leadership framework that will guide, one that is connected to the work of the Pacific Island Forum and others that would guide our at least a regional understanding of leadership from a Pasifika whole of life philosophical perspective? And three, to bring together many other leadership programs and organizations who are working towards the same goal under a regional platform in the Pacific Islands Forum. I think the Pacific Island Forum is key to bringing together the different leadership programs and organizations who are working towards this. But the problem is that we are saying the same thing in our different corners without speaking to each other. Whether it's a time for all of us to come together, I think that's the program that now BIS is doing, is the review of the regional architect in order to include other voices that are outside of the crop agencies and others, governmental organizations, that especially the civil societies and the faith-based organizations and the churches, to bring in the spirituality aspect that we have discussed this morning, to articulate for us the collective moral order, the collective moral fabric that have been collapsed in many development narratives around the world, and also other missing strands of our leadership narrative and discourse. Thank you. Nah.